Any? Get. You gotta bear with me for a minute, though.
The first question is if you have JT on your playlist.
I do. I do not. I do not have JT. Although I mean, he's all right. A couple of his songs probably show up in some of my playlists. I will say that. I don't have a dedicated playlist. I will say this though. This is funny. My wife called some friends of ours. This is like years ago. And she was like, hey, she was texting with him. And she was like, hey, JT is going to be playing in the Berkshires. You want to go? And the wife responded very enthusiastically, like, oh my gosh, absolutely, 100%, I'm in. And she was like, oh, cool. All right. And the whole chat went back and forth. And I jumped in like an hour later. And I called my wife. I was like, there's 0% chance that she thinks JT is James Taylor. And she was like, who else would it be? And I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, so then sure enough, she went back in to clarify and they were like, oh, yeah, no, that's not what I thought. That's not what I thought. Yeah. And I was like, nobody other than you on the planet would hear JT and think somebody else is going to know that's James Taylor. Anywho, all right, so let's kick off. Number one, how many people here love math by a show of hands? Or you can put fun emojis in the chat box. Who loves math? Kimberly White is like, I am not raising my hand. You are not getting me to move on that question. So here's the deal. We are going to do math today. One, let's set the stage for us to have a good time here and make it as fun as possible to do math. One, if you are in a place where you can put your camera on, please put your camera on. I don't care if you have messy hair. I don't care if you're eating a salad. Like, as long as you are fully dressed, you are not going to offend any of us. So please, if you can, turn your camera on. It's way more fun to teach and train and talk to actual human beings rather than black boxes with their names in it. So if you can do that, as we go, please feel free to unmute and ask questions. I definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. We are going to do math. I'm going to do the best I can to make it fun. And here's the deal. Yes, we're going to do math, and the vast majority of us in this industry don't love math. Those of you who know me may say I am a numbers guy or a spreadsheet guy. I am not a numbers guy. I am not a spreadsheet guy. I'm a guy who likes to win. And I have learned along the way that the path is in the math. So I have developed an affinity towards math because I have learned that if I understand the numbers, I can create my outcomes in a very predictable way. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to focus on the economic model. So timing is perfect. Now is the time that we should be doing our business planning for 2023, because the reality is we are basically in Q1 of 2023 right now. A lot of the work that we're doing to generate new business is not going to show up this year. It's going to show up in Q1. So now is the time that we should be doing our business planning, deciding what our goal is, what are the activities we're going to do in order to create those outcomes. And we should be implementing them now, so the results are showing up in the first quarter. So timing of this is perfect. What we're going to go through today, which is the economic model, is essentially the first step of your business planning, right? So if we think about business planning like planning a vacation, the first thing we have to decide is where the heck are we going, right? We need a destination. The economic model is that is step one. We decide what our destination is, and then we start working it backwards to figure out what activities we have to do and what results we have to generate in order to end up in the destination where we would choose to go. Does that make sense? Okay. Then after that, that leads us into our strategies. What are the strategies I'm going to employ in order to create the activities and the results, right? So that's kind of the process. So this is step one of that business planning process. If you came to the call late, there are documents in the chat box. I would encourage you to download those, print those, do whatever you want to do. This is going to be interactive. Each one of you is going to go through the economic model and you're going to fill it out based on your income goal for 2023. So we're going to walk through the math. Then you're going to do the math. Then we're going to discuss the outcomes and what ahas we have. And then we're going to move on to, oh my God, have you guys ever heard of Athletic Greens? It's like a shake that's full of like healthy vitamins. I just drank one and the powder is like choking my throat out right now.
Is it good? Because I was thinking about getting it.
I mean, I think it's good. My whole family makes fun of me for drinking it, but I think it tastes good and it's good for you. So I haven't been able to get my kids to try it yet. All right. So any comments, questions, anything before we kick off? Good to go. Okay, cool. All right, let me get the PowerPoint going here. Screen. All right, you guys have my screen? All right, let's roll. So we are all here to engage in empower your business with the economic model, which is exactly what we just discussed. It is the math to go from goal to what do I actually have to do in order to hit that goal, right? It is the ultimate, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? That's exactly what we're going to do right now. So what are we going to focus on? We're going to complete an economic model for each one of you. So again, if you want to let your wheels start turning, if you don't already know the number, what is your net profit goal that you want to accomplish for 2023? That is the number we're going to start with and work backwards. So we're all going to complete that economic model for our own business based on our own goal. We're going to set an achievable goal by completing that economic model. And we're going to identify the actions to take based on those goals that will translate into the activities. Okay, so we're really going to go from the economic model to the 411. Okay, and then we'll leave it with some, what are the next steps in order to finish off this business planning process. Okay, so we're going to go right to here. So this is what we're going to work off of. So you guys should have this printed out right now. You either printed or just downloaded it on your screen so you can fill it out. We're going to start by just walking through the math. It is not complicated if we take it a step at a time. Okay. I'm going to ask you guys to interact. So some of the answers that I might know, I'm still going to ask you what the answer is to make sure we're all staying engaged here. So the process we're going to follow is we're going to start out by filling in our net income goal. Okay. And right now I'm just going to walk you through this process. So we put in our net income goal. That is what we want to take home after expenses and after cost of sale. But let me start with this just in case there is anybody that doesn't have all the terminology straight in their head. Net income is your income after expenses and after cost of sale. In this particular conversation and in this particular exercise, this is pre-tax. So just remember when you're setting that goal, we're running the math on a pre-tax goal. Okay, so the only what's coming out after that net is Uncle Sam's money. So that's your net profit. Then we have our operating expenses, which I think are pretty self-explanatory. Those are all of your business expenses. Then you have your cost of sale. Cost of sale is any expense that only happens when you have a closed transaction. The most common cost of sale is going to be your split with your market center, a referral fee you pay to a referring agent, a split with a team member if you have selling agents on your team. Those are your three most common cost of sale. That is an expense that you only have if you have a closing. Now, a couple of things to know about that. I would tell you one of your challenges with a traditional bookkeeper / accountant, they tend to want to ignore cost of sale. At the end of the day, you never touch that money. So from an IRS tax filing standpoint, that number is irrelevant. They're never going to ask you what it is. It has no impact on your taxes. However, it's a really important number because if you go down the road of starting to build a team, the cost of sale becomes a really, really important number. It is one of the most common places where a team goes sideways and they end up building a massive thing that doesn't produce any profit, and they're stuck scratching their head and having conversations with their spouse about, I don't get it. I've got all the awards. I've got all the ribbons. I'm invited to all the top masterminds, yet we don't know where the money's. We don't know where it is, right? Cost of sale is one of the biggest challenges, right? So as people start building a team, if they don't fully understand the economics as a team scales, it is the splits that they will offer, because often they don't have the confidence in the value proposition that they're going to deliver to the agents on their team, and therefore they lean into cost as their greatest value rather than value as their greatest value. In turn, what that means is they give really high splits, and when the whole thing scales, there's just not enough revenue to support a healthy profit margin. So it becomes really important to know and track the cost of sale to ensure that your business is stable and going to be profitable. Next, we have total GCI. GCI is gross commission income. Gross commission income at its simplest form is what did the home sell for times the commission rate. It was $100,000 house, a 3% commission. GCI is $3,000. Okay, average commission is self-explanatory. So what we're going to do first is walk through those steps. So one, right now, I want you guys to take the sheet that you have that you're working off of, and I want you to put in your net income goal. And if you would be so kind and so bold, if you want to unmute and yell out your net income goal and or put it in the chat box, I would love that.
$100,000.
Love it. What else we got?
$500,000.
500,
100,000.
100, love it.
500,000.
300, 500,
185.
185, awesome.
250.
250, love it. Awesome. So all of you write that in that box. And by the way, just real quick, I love that you guys were willing to share that. We do function in an environment where the scoreboard is public. And a lot of times we can feel a lot of pressure, like to compare ourselves to other people. The important thing about your goal is it's a goal that actually has some meaning. Don't get caught up in somebody else's goal is bigger than mine, and therefore I am less than them. Your goal is your goal. All that matters is that goal allows you to do what you want to do, live the life that you want to live, right? And like we grow our business in steps, right? So whatever that goal is for this year, that's your goal. Just don't get caught up comparing your insides to other people's outsides. All right, so we've got that net goal written in there. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to divide that net income goal by 40%. And the answer that you get, so if it's 100,000, you're going to divide 100,000 by 0.4. And the result of that math, you're going to put on the fourth line, total GCI. Okay. Now, while everybody's doing that math and writing that down, I'm just going to rewind really quickly to tell you what it is we're actually doing. So has anybody ever heard of the MREA?
Yes.
Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. If you haven't, don't say it out loud. Make a note for yourself at the end of this to go to Amazon and order the book, or go to Audible and download the book. I do think it's a book worth having on paper. Yet go do both those things. It's fine. We all start somewhere, and that is our Bible. That is our blueprint. So in the MREA, there is a budget model, and this is what it looks like. At its simplest form, the Millionaire Real Estate Agent budget model is a 30-30-40 model. What you're seeing on the screen, it is 30% cost of sale, 30% operating expenses, and 40% net income. That is typically how a real estate business breaks down. Now, if you go to, I believe it's page 157 in the MREA, somewhere right around there, you'll see the budget model at different levels of production. It may go up or down slightly. Those percentages slightly tweak, but those slight adjustments at different levels of production are so small, it's not even worth overthinking it. Just think of the budget model as 30-30-40. 30% of what I earn is going to go to cost of sale. 30% is going to go to expenses. 40% is going to be my bottom line profit. By the way, is 40% a healthy profit margin for a business?
Yes.
It is not only healthy, that is a behemoth profit margin. That is an enormous profit margin. Okay. However, oftentimes we get into this business and we like to operate as if we have 100% profit margin. Right? Meaning the check comes in and we use all of the check all of the time, right? And that's where we get into real challenges. So it's a 30-30-40 model. Now, questions I always get around the 30-30-40 model, 30% cost of sale. Well, I don't have a team. Right? So if you're an individual agent with no team, the reality is your cost of sale, assuming you're a capper, is going to be your cap. If you have a $30,000 cap, your cost of sale will be $30,000 plus any referral fees you might pay, right? So it may actually be less than 30%. Here's what I tell everyone. Don't overcomplicate it, keep it simple. Run the calculations, use 30% as a cost of sale. The worst thing that can happen is when you use the 30%, if that is actually greater than what your cost of sale truly is based on being a solo agent, all it's going to do is it's going to give you numbers that when you actually go out and do those activities, you're going to do even better, right? You're going to net even more. And if you fall a little bit short of the activities that we get to at the end of this, if you fall a little bit short, you'll still hit your goal. So don't overcomplicate it. Keep it 30-30-40. Make sense? Okay. All right. So we're going to keep going. So we just took our net profit goal and we divided by 40%. The reason we use that number is that is the profit margin that real estate sales businesses operate on. That gave us our GCI. So that means in order to net that, we have to produce the amount of GCI that we already wrote down. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply that GCI number by 30%. And somebody unmute and tell me why we are multiplying it by 30%.
No idea. To find the operating expenses and cost of sale.
There you go. I was just going to give you a hint. It's on the slide. And yes, that is the answer. Right. So if we're operating on a 30-30-40 model, we take our total GCI, we multiply that by 30% or 0.3. That tells us what our expense budget is going to be and what our cost of sale budget is going to be. So on the screen right now is an example using $1 million. So we said we want to net $1 million. We divide that by 40, we get 2.5 million, which means we have to produce 2.5 million in GCI in order to keep 1 million. Then we multiply that 2.5 million by 0.3, or I'm sorry, divide. Wait, okay, slow down. Multiply by 0.3, and that gives us a cost of sale budget of 750 and an operating expense budget of 750. Okay, I'm going to pause here for a minute. Any questions? Okay. Let me have a few people.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Are you going to send us this slide afterwards so we can review it as well?
Yes, we can
Okay.
send you this. Did you download the document?
Yes, I do. That's what I ran to print. Okay,
So yes, we can send all these out to you guys.
okay.
Are you struggling with the math right now?
No, I just, this is a good, what you have here on the take action is a good cheat sheet. So I don't see that here anywhere. So it will just help me reflect a little bit after.
Perfect.
Sorry. I'm terrible with math, so this is.
It's fine. It's fine. That's why we're just going to do it. And then you can forget about the math and focus on the activities.
Perfect. I appreciate it.
Which is interacting with human beings.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
You're welcome. No problem at all. Okay. So at this point, we have our net income goal, we have our operating expenses, our cost of sale, and we have our total GCI goal. So now we're going to figure out how many units do we actually have to sell to generate that GCI. So we go back to this example. And actually, let me go back to make it a little bit easier. Let's go back to this example. So right now we've got our 1, 2, 3, 4 first 4 lines filled out. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take that total GCI number and we are going to divide it by our average commission. If you don't know what your average commission is, or maybe you're new and you don't have an average commission yet, I would use the average sales price in the area times 2.6. That'll give you an idea of that'll give you an average commission. Okay, so in this example, they used a commission of $7,150. So what they did on the screen here on the slide is they took the 2.5 million in GCI, divided it by their average commission, which in this example was $7,150. And that told them they have to sell 349.6 houses. We always round up. So 350 homes is what this individual would have to sell, with an average commission of 7,150 in order to generate the 2.5 million that will allow them to net the 1 million. Okay, so first, and believe it or not, we're moving through the math piece pretty quick, so we'll be able to wrap up most of the math quickly if anybody's brain is sizzling already.
Matt, can I ask a question?
Please.
What always confuses me is like, how do you figure the amount of the commission? Is it what comes into the office before you get your check?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So no, it is the sale price of the house times the commission rate. So don't worry about to the
but
office or anything.
Our office half or what?
Nope.
You
Nope.
mean, so if it's like 5%, then it's times 5%?
So you're gonna use one side of the transaction. So
Oh,
let's
okay.
use 5, and we have to be careful when we talk about commission in this type of forum.
Right, well, just as an example, yeah.
So I'm just using an example of 5% for mathematical purposes. Let's assume it is for easy math, $100,000 house, 5% commission. That's $5,000, but you're on one side of that, right? We talk about real estate as sides. If you listed it and sold it, that's actually 2 sides. You're really receiving 2 commissions. That's how we want to think about it when we're planning. So the number you're putting in here is the sale price of the house. And then this model would be times 2.5. So if your average sales price was, say, 500,000 times 2.5, which is one side of a 5% transaction, your average commission would be 12,500.
Okay.
Does
Matt,
that,
I think I did the math wrong. I'm so sorry.
that's all right. Can I pause you for 1 minute, Susan?
Yes.
Lorraine, I just want to make sure we close the loop. Did that make sense and answer the question?
Yes, it did. I thought that was the answer, but I see that it coming out with 7,150 is what confused me, because usually it's so much higher, but I guess it's because we're basing it on, I don't know.
It just depends on your average sales price.
Yeah,
So in this example, wherever the average sales price in this example would be lower than what most of us have in our current market, if that's the average commission.
mhm.
So again, just whatever your average transaction dollar amount is, 500,000, 350, 320, that times 2.5% or 2.6%, like that's going to give you your average commission. Okay, so when you divide the total GCI by that number, you're going to write the answer in total units sold. That's telling you in order to generate 2.5 million with an average commission of 7,150, you have to sell 350 homes. Okay, so I'm going to pause there and I'm going to go to Susan.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm looking at this model and now I'm like, so somehow my total GCI is less than my net profit goal. That's wrong, right?
That is wrong. Yep.
All
So
right,
give me-
that's
give
where
me
my
your-
mistake is.
Yep. This is perfect, though. We're going to do this together in case anybody else is struggling and just not saying it. So what is your net income goal?
My net, all right, so 185.
185. And we're going to divide that by
Mhm.
40%.
And I had gotten, and that gives us our total GCI, right?
Yep.
So I had gotten 74,000.
Okay, you multiplied instead of dividing. So,
Okay. So that's my mistake. Okay,
so your total GCI based on that goal is gonna be 462,500.
that makes more sense.
Yeah, so to get that number, you have to divide by 40%, not multiply. You just multiplied, that's all.
Gotcha. Thank
Right.
you.
Okay, so now you're gonna take that 462.5
Yep.
times 30%.
Okay.
And what do you get?
138,750.
You nailed it. So that is gonna be your cost of sale at that level of production, and that is gonna be your operating expense. So you're gonna put that 138,750 in both of those slots.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
All right.
What other questions so far? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay,
My computer crashed. I'm so sorry. So I missed part of this. It completely wiped out everything. So I'm way behind. So I'm just, this take action, I just took a print screen so I could kind of catch up. So thank you.
perfect. And if I have the opportunity at the end, if you do need me to hang out separately, I can hang out separately and try to catch you up.
Thanks.
All right, so right now we've got all of these metrics, right? So we know how many houses we have to sell. So same thing, just unmute and shout out your number. How many homes do you have to sell?
50.
50,
73.
73,
32.
32,
33.
33. Okay,
50 deals. I'm a commercial broker.
deals. We'll call them deals for you. Sounds good. Let me ask you a question. and It's okay if you don't. Did when you got to that number, I'd love to hear your reaction to it. Like, does that feel big? Does that feel small? Is it scary? Like, what are your thoughts when you see that number?
I still feel like I did the math wrong. Mine says 66 houses.
Okay, let's check it real quick.
I'm so sorry.
What was your total GCI you had to do for,
462,500.
okay, what'd you use as an average commission?
I just wrote 55. 5,500.
It would be 84.
I'm really good at math, everybody.
It's all right. That's why we're doing it together. Yep, so it's just the 462.5 divided by 5,500 gets you to 84.
Okay.
Good to go.
Matt, I've done this before with other classes and I came out with a much lower number of units. So I'm wondering if I did something wrong. GCI 250. And I did it on 2.5%, so I came up with 6,250 for average commission amount.
So let me walk you through and ask the questions. Your total GCI was what to hit your goal?
250,000.
250,000. What's your average commission you used?
6,250.
40.
Okay. I think it's the average commission. Most of the time, the average commission is much higher.
Yeah, again, you want to use your average commission. So if your average commission is 20,000, you should be using 20,000. What we have on the screen is just an example to be able to walk through the math together.
Okay.
Okay,
Matt, I'm a little lost too. If I want net income at 100,000, and then didn't you say multiply that by 40%?
divide by 40.
Divide it by 40%. Okay,
That'll give you 250,000.
okay.
Yep.
I
So you
think
put-
what was confusing me was the operating expense and the cost of sales, 750 on your sample. My mind kept adding them together. So they're
Yep.
really just the same number. It's
They will
not,
be, yes, they'll be the same number because each one of them is 30%. So again,
okay,
100,000, you're gonna divide by 40%.
yeah,
That's gonna give you 250 for total GCI, which you're gonna
Yep.
write in by total GCI.
yeah,
You're gonna multiply that by 30%. And what you're gonna get is 75,000 for cost of sale and 75,000 for operating expenses.
okay, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so now we're gonna go to the next piece. So we're gonna start breaking this down as And this is a part where we're gonna get to the actual activities. What are the activities that we have to do? So I'm gonna go through this whole piece, then I'm gonna answer questions, then I'm gonna let you guys do the math. So the next thing we have to decide is, in our example, we had to do 350 transactions. The next question we're gonna answer for ourselves and our business is what percent of the units that we have to sell are going to be list side or sell side transactions. So how many are buyer sides, how many are sellers? Okay, the typical business is 50-50. Right? Depending on where you are in the business and what you're doing the prospect though, you may be heavier on buyers or you may be heavier on listings. Now, what we want to do is take control of that. So if you are heavy on buyers right now, so let's say theoretically you're 80% buyers and 20% listings, I would argue you don't have to use those numbers because that is a choice. We can choose to do activities that will increase our listing, the listing side of our business or the buyer side of our business. But what you do want to do right now is just decide. My expectation is that my business will be 50% buyers, 50% sellers, or 60%, 40%. That's your choice. You pick the number. Okay, so on your sheet, you're going to go down to, you've got your total units. Then you've got your arrows that go to sell side and buy side. That first line of each side, under sell side, you're going to write that percentage. What percent of your closed units are going to be listings? On the other side is going to be the percent that will be buyer sides. The two should obviously add up to 100%. Everybody good? Okay, next piece, we're just going to multiply the total units we have to sell. In our $1 million example, it's 350. On the sell side, times what percent are going to be listings. In our example, 50% are going to be listings. So 350 times 50% is 175 total seller listings sold. So right now, we're just on the first and second line of what you're seeing on the screen. So 50% of our closed units are going to be sell side. We have to sell 350 units. 350 times 50% is 175. Give me some thumbs up when you're there. Unmute if you have a question. Okay. If you want to like take it to a whole nother level, you can jump over to the buyer side and do that math quick too. Right? It's the same math, whatever percent of the total units, multiply that, and that'll tell you how many buyer listings sold. We're going to call them buyer listings. How many buyer listings you're going to have to sell. Okay, now we're going to go to the third line. This is the percent sold conversion rate. So what this is, and I'm on the sell side now, this is of all the listings that I take, what percent of them sell? Now, keep in mind, in the last 2 to 2.5 years, it's like 110%. Right? Like almost everything sells. If something hasn't sold in the last 2 years that went on the market, there was a serious problem, either condition, pricing, and or both, something absurd. Almost everything has sold. There's very few expireds over the last 2.5 years, although they do exist. So you want to put in a number that is reasonable. The number that they often use in training around the MREA models is they'll use a 70% rate. So for all the homes that I list, 70% are going to sell, 30% are going to expire or cancel or withdraw. If you know your business metrics and you know you're at 90, you're at 85, you use your number. If you don't know your number, I would say be conservative, use the 70%. If you do better, once again, it's just going to help you overachieve on the goal. Okay, so in our example, we're now taking the 175. That's how many seller sides I have to sell. We're saying, well, 70% of what I list is actually going to sell. So once again, we're going to divide, not multiply. we're gonna divide 175 by 0.7. Which in our example on the screen gives us 250 total seller listings. That means we have to take 250 listings. And when 70% of them sell, I'll have 175 closed listings or deals for Dunkin'. Okay, I'm gonna pause there. Do math. If you have a question, unmute. Everybody's good on the math? Okay. All right, so now we should know how many listings we have to take all year to hit our goal. The next piece is appointment conversion. Most of us, well, I shouldn't say most of us. Depending on how much business you're doing, the larger your business gets and the more listing appointments you go on, the less likely it is that you're going to get every single listing. A lot of us have said it or have heard people say, I take 100% of every listing appointment I go on. By the way, I used to say it too. And I would push back and say that just means you haven't been on enough listing appointments. Eventually, you're not going to get them all. You may get a really high percentage because you're really good. You're not going to get them all. So the next number is of all the listing appointments I go on, what percent of them do I actually get the listing? Again, they use 75%. So if I go on 4 listing appointments, I'm getting 3 of them. One of them might get away. Or one of them might choose not to list, right? One of them might have a cousin's uncle's sister who raises goats for a living, but also has a real estate license and we don't want to offend her, so we're going to list with her. That didn't even make Duncan smile. I thought I'd get a smile out of him. Nothing. He's like, nope, not funny, man. Okay, moving on. I'm gonna make you smile, Duncan, before this call's over. Okay. So now we're gonna take that percentage, whatever it is, the 75%, or whatever number you chose to use, and we're gonna divide our total seller listings needed. We're gonna divide, in our example, by 75%. And then we get to our final number on the sell side, which is, in order to hit my goal, I need 333 seller appointments. So that when I convert 75% of those appointments to an actual listing, that will be 250 listings that I take all year, of which 70% I will successfully sell, which will give me 175 listings sold for the year. Duncan smiled. Love it. Nice job. Thank you, sir. Okay. Should you choose, shout out your number. How many listing appointments?
37.
25.
45.
73.
134.
45.
45. Love it. Love it. Now, here's where I would take it a step further. I'm going to say this and then I'm going to pause for you guys to jump over to the other side and you're just doing the same math. But here's what I will say. What's not on the sheet that I like to do is in our example, and actually, you know what, Ryan Raymond, I'm going to pick on you. Will you unmute?
Yes, sir.
All right, you're on my screen, so you're the unlucky victim. What was your number?
134.
134 listing appointments. So number one, what happens in your stomach when you say that number out loud?
Yeah, cringe a lot.
You threw up in your mouth a little bit?
Yeah.
It's okay to admit, disgusting visual. I should come up with a better one. Now, here's the thing. So that's 134 listing appointments in a year. Let's divide that by 12 months. So that's actually 11.1 listing appointments every single month. Divide that by 4. And we're going to round up. The answer is actually 2.79. And since we always round up that last number, we're gonna call it 3. That's 3 listing appointments a week. Now, how much money would you net based on this math when you go on 3 listing appointments a week?
300 grand.
300 grand. Okay. When you break it all the way down to a week, does that feel a lot more attainable than thinking about that giant number?
Yes, and I mean, like, I've set 3 appointments in an hour before, so it's like totally doable. It's the week after week, the consistency, I think that's a struggle.
100%. Yep. And I'll share this story. When I originally stepped in as the operating principal for my current market center, we were actually not highly profitable. There were some pretty good challenges, right? It was during the crash. So the brokerage business was tough. The real estate business was tough. A lot of brokers were losing money, right? It was a tough time to be in the business. And that's when I chose to get in on the brokerage side of the business. And what we did that first year is we sat down and we did the market center version of this math, which we call owner profit gap analysis. All that is an economic model for a market center. And we set a goal to increase our profitability by 40%, which an organization the size that we were at that time, to make a 40% leap in a single year is a massive leap. And we ran this path backwards until we got to our version of these numbers. And for the rest of the year, and then we carried that forward into a 135 and a 411. And for the rest of the year, we never talked about the big number. The only thing we talked about was our daily and weekly commitment to do that one thing. And fast forward at the end of the year, we were within a fraction of that 40% increase, which in business is a bullseye. And also went on to get recognized as one of the fastest growing market centers in the entire Keller Williams franchise that year at Family Reunion. Now, if we focused on the big audacious thing, it would have A, been overwhelming, and B, been much harder to stay focused. But when we just drilled it down and kept the conversation around that one thing, we don't have to worry about the rest. We don't need to talk about profit. We don't need to talk about this. By the way, I'm not saying those things aren't important and you don't track them in your business, but our time, energy, and effort can go 85% into that one thing that we know when we do it, the results will show up. It's time on task over time, right? It's not going to necessarily show up immediately, but when you do it consistently, the result will show up. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's shift over to the buyer side. Okay, on the buyer side, we're going to run the same math. So the only difference, it's the exact same math. But when we get down to percent sold conversion ratio, so that is for every buyer broker agreement you get, what percent of them end up buying a house? They use 70%. As the example, you can choose your number if you know your numbers. If not, you can lean on theirs and use the 70%. We're going to do the same thing. Divide the 175 by 70%, and that's going to tell us we need to take 250 buyer listings, which would be a buyer broker agreement, in order to have 175 of them buy a house with us. The next piece, we're just doing our appointment conversion. For every buyer consultation I do, what percent of them sign a buyer broker agreement with me? In this example, they're using 70% again. Yours might be higher. Whatever that number is, if you know it, use it. If you don't, lean on the 70%. You're going to divide the 250 by the 70, and it's going to tell you how many buyer consultations you have to have so that you can take 250 buyer brokers, so that when 70% of them buy a house successfully with you, you close 175 buyer side transactions. Does that make sense? Thumbs up.
Hi, Matt, I'm lost because I'm doing a 60-40, so the buyer side is 40%. And I just forgot how we got the other side, the 60% of what number?
Okay,
So
so
that
let's,
would be 40% of what number?
so let's go through your buyer side quickly.
Okay,
What's your total number of units you have to do total?
40,
Okay, what percent of
Okay.
those need to be buyer side?
40%. That's where I was.
40%. Yep, so you're gonna multiply your 40 by 40%,
Okay,
and that'll give you your total buyer listings sold. And then you're gonna follow your math through.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay,
Lorraine,
questions?
that goes to 16.
Oh, I missed that. What was that?
I told Lorraine it goes to 16.
That's what I got. I just was a little confused when thinking about the beginning of it.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, so I want to pause here for a minute and expand my screen so I can see more of you. Okay, before we go any further, comments, questions, ahas? Give me something, otherwise I feel like I'm talking to myself. What do you got?
I love numbers. Numbers love me.
I never hear that, and I love that. That's great. By the way, if you think you're bad with numbers, you should just make that your mantra. I love numbers and numbers love me. Eventually, you'll convince yourself it's true, and then eventually it'll become true. What else?
It just shows that it's really not insurmountable to meet your numbers as long as you break it down. And I like the weekly breakdown. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, and I want to share this story. I shared this with a couple folks yesterday morning. Our biggest challenge, both in our industry and just as human beings in general, we love to overcomplicate things. It's just what we do. We make everything more complicated than it actually is. When you look at the most successful people in anything, what you will find is they figure out how to make it simple and follow through. Right? It's about reps. It's about consistency. Consistency beats charisma every single time. Our biggest challenge as human beings in succeeding at whatever it is we want to do at a high level, it doesn't matter if it's fitness, health, finance, our business, is our consistency. Like, do we just decide where we want to go, break it down into the simple, create a plan in order to do that, put that in our calendar and wake up every day and acknowledge the fact that I have one job and one job only, and that is to follow my calendar. And if I do that, the outcome that I want from my life will show up. But instead, we wake up every morning and what do? We start giving ourselves choices. Like, am I going to do that today? I know I said I was going to start today, but like, I also have this, like maybe I'll start Wednesday. Today's not the day because I don't have this thing ready. Right. And we just start to make up all those stories. As soon as you make something non-negotiable, it becomes massively easy to do it. I'll give an example. And by the way, please don't take offense to this. Like, this is not a political conversation. It's just a true story. So we have a small accountability group of my team at the Market Center where we will commit to a personal goal for 66 days and we'll hold each other accountable to it. So for a bit, I had fallen off of my consistent workouts. So I chose that as my 66 days. I said, I'm going to work out 5 days a week, 30 minutes each. I'm going to send you a snap of me at the gym. Like, that's my accountability. So I had to make it so painful to not do it that it became non-negotiable. So I was having this conversation with my coach, and he started out with, what's an organization or a human that you despise at such a high level? You would never want to contribute to them in any way, shape, or form. And I was like, I gotta be honest, like, I just don't have that kind of venom in me. Like, I can't think of a single human being I mean, sure, there's organizations that I despise, but I would despise them at such a level, I wouldn't even contribute to them. So no, like, I just don't know. And then I kind of had an aha. And again, this is not political, right? I was like, yeah, it would actually bother me a lot if I contributed to Donald Trump. By the way, has nothing to do with politics. I have issues with him as a human being that, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't even deserve the conversation to lead our country. And that's just my opinion. If I offended you, please don't be offended. That's just my feeling about him as a human and a leader. It has nothing to do with politics. As far as I'm concerned, he doesn't cross the first bar. My opinion, nobody else's. Please don't take offense. So I said, I would never, like, I would not send money in that direction. So he said, okay, that's it. Well, who would hold you accountable? If you actually said, I will write a check, this is what it turned into. It turned into, I had to write a $5,000 check. And if I missed a single workout, that $5,000, I couldn't contribute it because there was no campaign or anything to contribute to. So it turned into that $5,000 was going to be spent on Trump gear. And I had to wear every piece of that Trump gear in public. So as long as it took me to burn through $5,000 worth of that gear, I had to do that every day until every article of that clothing had been worn in public. Do you think that became non-negotiable for me? It became non-negotiable. And by the way, it got real simple, real quick. It was just, you got to do it. You set it, your dates. If something gets in the way, you do it later. Like, it doesn't matter. You're just going to do it. So sometimes we got to play tricks with ourselves to remove, right? I spent some time in the military. It's the easiest time in my life. And by the way, I spent time overseas in a combat zone. When I say it was easy, they told you exactly what you needed to do, when you needed to do it, and how you need to do it. They took all the choice out of everything. So you literally woke up every day, whether you wanted to do it or not, you just did it, which actually made it very stress-free. There were different types of stress, but there was none of that internal dialogue. Like, hey, am I going to get up? It's really early. Like, the sun hasn't even risen yet. I don't think I'm going to do that. Am I really going to do PT today? I just don't feel like doing push-ups in the mud. It was non-negotiable. You were doing it. The question was just, somebody going to physically drag you into it, or are you going to go on your own accord? You're doing it one way or the other. And once it became non-negotiable, it was just easy to do. Does that make sense? So just remember, consistency beats charisma. Make it as easy as you possibly can to remove choice. Remove the inner dialogue about whether you are or are not going to do it. And try to create that situation where you're just going to, period, end of story. Don't waste the energy on the internal dialogue. Is that helpful?
Matt, what was the last sentence? Make it as easy as possible to, I missed a word.
To eliminate that internal dialogue.
That's it.
It's a non-option. Like when you, there's another one they say, I think it's like the 3-second rule. Like when you wake up in the morning, you want to hit snooze, you got 3 seconds. You count 1, 2, 3, and your feet hit the floor. Like, it's a non-option. All that time you spend in bed, like, another 15 minutes isn't going to kill me. I can just bump this to this. And if I shorten this a little bit, I'll be just fine. It's all those internal dialogues that burn our energy. They reduce our focus and they pull us further away from our goals. Okay.
We
All
are
right.
always making deals with ourselves to try to.
Yeah, we're always making deals with ourselves to move ourselves further away from what it is we actually want. Right? Like, at the end of the day, success is nothing other than the accumulation of the right decisions over and over and over again, a minute at a time, an hour at a time, a day at a time, a month at a time. And lack of success is just the opposite. It's accumulation of the wrong decisions stacked on top of each other, a minute at a time, an hour at a time, a week at a time, a month at a time. It's the same. It's all just wherever we are. There's no point in being upset about it. It is a accumulation of all the choices we've made. If we don't like it, we should look at our choices and make different ones. And when we do that long enough, consistently, we will end up where we want to be. It sounds oversimplistic, but it's not. We just don't like simple answers, because then it's harder to come up with excuses as to why we don't do it. Okay, questions, comments before we move on? Okay, is this helpful so far? Give me some feedback.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Helen.
I like the way you're going slow enough for us to really let it sink in what we're doing.
Good. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that I would hope, we have an hour and a half. That's all we have. My biggest hope is that when we leave here, all of you have that one page and you know what the next step is to turn that one page into an action plan. When we accomplish that in an hour and a half, we're in good shape. You're way ahead of the game for your business planning for 2023. Okay. So now we're going to talk about the tool that we use here at Keller Williams to identify the actions that we're going to take based on the goals that we've set, right? So now we know the velocity of activities we have to do in order to generate the outcomes. Now the question just becomes, how are we going to do it? Okay, the two tools that we use at KW, and in this particular session, we're going to the 411, the two business planning tools that we use after the economic model are the 135, which is also called the GPS, and the 411. Now, I'm going to talk about the GPS quickly. The GPS is this, or the 135, whatever terminology we use. The G stands for goal, and you have one goal, hence the one. Anybody that I am consulting with around business, I encourage them that that one is always a net profit goal. We are running a business. The purpose of business is to fund a perfect life. In order to do that, it has to be profitable. Your one thing should be, what is my net profit goal? Under that can be all of the other things, but in my opinion, you need to drive the business towards the end game, and the end game is the net profit. That doesn't mean you can't, provide wonderful service, be a philanthropist, yet you need money to do all those things. So whatever number you put on the top of your economic model, in my opinion, that is the one or the G, the goal in a 135. Then you go to the P or the 3. The P is your priorities. It is 3 priorities that when I execute on those priorities, they will cause that goal to happen. A very simplistic example might be if we looked at our economic model and we said, my goal is to net $1 million. My first priority is to my first priority is to have 133 listing appointments by X date. As you're creating priorities and goals, they should always be SMART goals. And I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head. I may mess it up, so somebody who knows it can help me. A SMART goal is simple, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound.
Perfect.
Thank you. So you should look at every goal you set and ask yourself the question, does it check all those boxes? Right? The purpose of that, and I would argue, simple is important, because if it's not simple, we won't execute it consistently. Measurable is important, because how do we know if we're on task if it's not measurable? If my goal is to be in the best shape of my life, you could define that 1,000 different ways. If my goal is to get to 6% body fat, I can measure that. I can, 3 months into that goal, I can say I am 30% of my way to hitting that goal. I can tell at any point in time, am I on track to hit it? Am I behind? Am I ahead? Right? So it's measurable, attainable, and realistic. Those ones people struggle with sometimes, right? Because we live in that environment where we say, write your goal down, cross it out, double it. The idea of crossing it out and doubling it is to stretch our brains as to what is possible. And oh, by the way, if you create a plan to do twice the business that you originally said you were going to do, it gives you a lot of runway to miss that goal and still overachieve the original goal. But the idea of crossing it out and doubling it is more about stretching your mind as to what is possible, to say, wow, well, I said 50, cross it out, double it. Okay, that's 100. It's more about making you think, my gosh, if I had to do 100 transactions, how would I do it? Right? It's about making you think bigger, because if you can think about how to do 100, it makes it a lot easier to actually go out and do 50. So it's more about stretching your mind, but that goal should be a goal you actually buy into. Like if you say, I'm going to close 100 transactions, and you don't actually believe in your heart that you can do it, it's just going to become a piece of paper that you look at come New Year's and go, oh yeah, I remember when I said that. So you gotta believe that you can do it, right? It should make you a little nervous. But you gotta believe you can actually do it or you won't take action. Okay, then we get down to the S or the 5, if you're using the 1, 3, 5. Those are your strategies. S is for strategy. So for every priority you have, these are the strategies. These are the things I'm gonna actually do in order to cause the priority to happen. So that when those priorities happen, the goal gets attained. Now, if you rewind real quick, thinking about the GPS, the 1 or the G is an outcome. It is the actual outcome. When you get down to your priorities are also outcomes. Your strategies are the things I'm going to do to cause the outcome. Those are activities. So strategies are always things I'm going to do to cause outcomes. Priorities are 3 outcomes. Then when all 3 of them happen, cause the big one to happen. Does that make sense? Okay. And here's why we talk about that. That GPS gives us the 1 page. And the way Gary says it, number 1, if you're running a business, how do you know everybody's on the same page if it doesn't actually fit on 1 page? So it's about keeping your plan simple. So you do your 1, 3, 5, and then your 1, 3, 5 carries over into your 4, 1, 1. And just to understand how all these dots connect, once you do a 4, 1, 1, the things on your 4, 1, 1, those are the most important things that I need to do to cause the result that I want, for me to hit that goal. Those things now go in my calendar before I put anything else in my calendar. This is when I'm going to do it. This is how long I'm going to do it and how often I'm going to do it. We put it in our calendar. Then we fill everything else in around it. And this is when you hear somebody say you actually only have 1 job, and that is to follow your calendar. If you actually connect the dots with all these tools, I did an economic model, I carried it over to a GPS, I put it into my 411, and then I put it in my calendar. Now you literally have 1 job, because everything that is in your calendar is what's going to cause everything else to happen. My job, getting back to keeping things simple, is to wake up every day, forget the inner dialogue. It's non-negotiable. When my calendar says this is what I do on this day at this time, I just do it. And I don't stop until my calendar says it's time to stop. And in the rare occasions that I have to erase something, it's erase and replace. I canceled my lead gen this morning. That means I'm moving to the end of the day and I'm adding it back in. Now I'm going to wrap up my day and I'm going to go back to the office or my home office or whatever it is. And I'm going to get that lead gen in at night. Because if I erase, I have to replace. Because if I erase those activities, I am erasing my goal. Just 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time, right? That's how we have to look at it. Okay. Questions about how these things connect? Because I wanted to go through that. For me, it wasn't that long ago. It was only a few years ago where I really connected all the dots. As far as when you use all of these tools effectively, how simple it makes achieving your goal. If you do it all correctly, it's like dominoes. And the last domino is your calendar. And after that, it's just the commitment to follow it. Right. And if you wake up every day and it's non-negotiable and you just do what's in there, you're going to hit your goal. Okay. Questions? Okay. So before we do a course summary, I want to pull up. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute here. And I'm going to share an example. I'm going to share another version. Just give me a second here. Okay. Thank you.
Did you just have a birthday?
I did, yes.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. You saw the balloon in the back?
I was about to ask the same
Yes,
thing.
yep.
Yep.
You know what else they got me? They got me this. Which is a giant self-portrait of me that they turned into an album cover. So apparently I am a rapper who has an album and my rap name is Dirty Mouse. It's a long story how that happened. It was a prank where I was cold at Disney and they went and bought me the most ridiculous sweater on the planet. And then I wore it all night long. And all night long they were laughing and taking pictures of me. And now that picture shows up everywhere because they seem to, it apparently never gets old for them. Okay, so on my screen, you see an Excel spreadsheet of a 411. Okay, this came from the onething.com. So if you go to the onething.com, they have these templates and they have them both in Word or PDF, but then they also have them in Excel spreadsheets. Now I modified this slightly. This is the format I use for a 411. If you go to the One Thing or you look at the templates we give you, you'll usually have your professional goals and your personal goals. I like to add finance and or wealth, whatever word you want to use, because in my mind, I think about business as business is what funds my personal goals and my long-term wealth goals. So I want to have 3 sets of goals. What am I doing in my business to make sure my business achieves what it needs to achieve to allow me to live the way I want to live and take care of the people in my life the way I want to take care of them. And that also needs to be able to fund my long-term wealth building. So I like to have them with the 3. And it's super simple. And by the way, this is a muscle. Like it takes time. There's a good chance if you've never done this, you're going to start it, you're going to fall off. Just keep going back. Like it takes time to get into the rhythm of it. But I can tell you anybody who has done it for any period of time, whether they've fallen off or not, will acknowledge they were far more productive and move their goals faster when they're on the 411. So over here, we're just going to go personal. This is the 5 goals or professional. I'm sorry, the 5 professional goals that I want to achieve. Then I put the 5 personal goals that I want to achieve. Then I put the 5 finance and or wealth building goals that I want to achieve. By the way, if you can achieve what you want to achieve in business and you can do it with 2 goals, do we need 3 other goals? No. If there is one goal that I could choose to focus on for my business that would allow me to hit my goal, do I need 4 others? No. We don't need to create activity for the sake of activity or complexity for the sake of complexity. We only need as many as it's going to take to get us to our goal. Gary Keller will tell you, when you do a 1-3-5, your first priority should be so powerful that if you didn't do anything else, you would hit your goal. And the first strategy under that should be so powerful that if you did nothing else, you would hit the priority, and that priority by itself would cause you to hit the goal. That's a high bar. Like, I am not going to pretend I have gotten to that level with this yet. The idea is you want to prioritize everything based on what has the greatest impact. So if you can accomplish what you want to accomplish with 2 goals, you don't need to spin your wheels trying to come up with 3. So you have your personal, you put in your professional, your personal, and in my case, I put in my finance or wealth goals. Then we go down to monthly. All I'm doing is saying, okay, if my number 1 goal here is whatever, I need to list 100 homes, or I have to sell 100 listings in 2023. Well, down here, I'm just going to put the activity that I have committed to in order to do that. So for that month, what is the activity that I decided I was going to do that was going to cause me to list enough homes every month to allow me to accomplish that goal? And then you're just saying, okay, I'm going down to the week. So in order to do that for the month, to cause the year to happen, what am I doing this week? And then it's what ends up in this week is what ends up in our calendar. And I'm going to show you an example. I think if I can pull it up, I'll grab like an old 411 and share it with you. Another thing I want you to understand is there's two different things that are going to show up on a 411. One is an activity that you do over and over again for the life of your career. What would be the most obvious example of that?
Lead generation.
Lead generation.
Yes, the most obvious, lead generation. And that, whatever that means to you, as long as it's real, whatever that means to, whatever activities you do to create the opportunity to have the number of real estate conversations that you need to have with actual human beings to allow you to hit your goal, that's lead generation. However it is that you do that, whether that is the phone, whether that is something else, it's however you do it. And if it's the phone, make sure it's done in a TCPA compliant way. So those activities, they're going to be on your 411, they're going to go in your calendar, they're always going to stay there. And to the highest degree possible, they're always there and they're always on the same day at the same time. Then you're going to have other things that might be more like projects, right? An example might be, there was a point in time when I was selling that the market shifted and shifted hard. And I looked up and realized, okay, all the activities I'm doing are causing the outcome that I wanted, which is more listing appointments. The only problem is I've gone from listing 100% of the listing appointments I go on to listing 70% of them. Why was I only listing 70%? Well, the market had shifted. And now I was finding that I was meeting with people and the market wasn't going to allow them to do what they wanted to do. So they were choosing not to list at all, right? Because the market had declined rapidly. So I looked up and said, okay, I'm going to have to think about how I do this differently. So one of the things I decided to do when I went through the 135 is I was going to layer on top of that all the lead gen that I was already doing. I was going to carve out some of that lead gen time to focus specifically on lead generating to people who need to sell, not want to sell. Need to sell, not want to sell, because it was a need to sell market, not a want to sell market. And I was going to focus on sources that could provide me with multiple transactions per year. Okay, so in doing that, I made a list of what are all the sources that fit into those buckets. Well, the need to know, not want to sell was short sales, bank foreclosures, probate, flippers. Those homes are inventory to them. They have to get them off the books. So I just made a list of who are all the people who own real estate that they have to sell. And then I layered prospecting those categories into the prospecting I was already doing. So the reason I'm showing you this example, lead gen, expireds, FSBO, sphere of influence was always in my calendar. But then I said, okay, each week I'm going to go back to my GPS and I'm going to say, okay, this week I'm going to layer in calls to probate attorneys to see if I can set up some meetings to start building some relations to be able to help support them in servicing their clients. Right. And that conversation was super simple. Hey, Ed, this is Matt Erdman at Erdman Real Estate Group of Keller Williams Realty. I'm a real estate agent at Keller Williams. And I've noticed lately, I'm dealing with a lot of folks that are helping their parents transition to the next phase of life. A lot of times they are asking me legal questions that I either don't know the answers to or don't feel like I'm the right person to be answering them. I would love to have a relationship with somebody because I'm guessing sometimes they come to you and they have real estate needs. I'd love to grab a coffee or have lunch, see if we click. If so, maybe we can help each other, help our clients. Is that something you'd like to do? I was shocked. They all said yes. Right. And then I went, I met with them, I built a relationship, and then I started to create that repeat referral source from them. So I'm using that as an example. Is there some things that are going to come off your GPS, go in your 411, then your calendar, and they're going to be there all the time. There are other things that are going to be projects. I want to launch a farm, a $5,000 roof farm area by X date, right? I'm going to pick an area and I'm going to start consistently farming that area. That's kind of a project. Like I'm going to have to set aside a time aside to plan that. That's a thing that you're going to go to your GPS and say, okay, the next thing that has the greatest impact on my business, other than me lead generating every single day, is getting this farm up and running. I'm going to take that off my GPS. I'm going to bring it over to my 411 for this month. And then I'm going to say, this week, what am I doing to get that project started? And then that's gonna go in my calendar as to when I'm doing it. Now, here's the key. Nothing else comes over from the GPS until you've executed on that project and it is up and running. Once it's up and running, you can go back to the GPS and get the next thing. The biggest challenge we run into is we create a GPS that has a bunch of stuff on it and we try to do it all at once. Right? You ever have that friend who loves doing projects, but only the first 70%? Yeah. And you go to their house and there's all these great projects, but none of the trim is up, stuff's not caulked. Like they just never totally finish it. It's because they're trying to do everything at once instead of finishing one thing and moving on. So it's really important, you know, there's certain things that carry over, they just stay on my calendar. Those are things I do consistently all the time. After that, I go and get the most important thing that'll have the greatest impact on achieving the goal. I carry that over. That's what's on the 411 and in my calendar until I fully execute it. I don't go back and get anything new. Right? And if we do that, it doesn't matter if we only get one of them done. If we do it and do it well and it's complete and now it's fully functioning in our business, that is more progress than if we started all this stuff and never finished any of it. Does that make sense? Okay. Questions? Comments? You got to talk to me. Otherwise it's weird and I assume I'm boring you.
Ryan asked the question, when you are that friend, how do you change?
You have a spouse?
Actually, that's a good point because she is like a task list. She's one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And I caught myself, I don't know, it was one day this week, like I saw your screen when you were sharing, you have a whole bunch of tabs open. I had a whole bunch of tabs open and I was like doing one thing. Then I went to the next, and like I didn't finish I was doing 7 things at once and like none of them actually got finished.
Yeah. So there's a few things you can do to help with that. Number one, changing your own human behavior is one of the hardest things you can possibly do. So there's 2 ways you can protect yourself if it's just not your nature, right? Like if you're that just naturally you want to bounce all over like a hummingbird. One is decide what's the one thing that's the most important thing for me to actually do and stay completely focused on. And in the beginning, put all your energy, all your mental energy into doing that one thing without distraction completely until it's done, and give yourself a little bit of grace afterwards to be scattered. Because changing our own behavior or fighting our urges to do things actually takes a tremendous amount of energy, like a ton. Like we don't know it because like we think about like lifting heavy things or running, like that's exhausting. It is equally exhausting to fight our nature. Right? Every decision you have to make takes energy. And you run out of mental energy. That is why you see some really, really like hyper successful people who wear the same clothes every day. That's not a weird intricacy. They're literally, they go through their life and they remove as many choices as they possibly can so they can save that bandwidth for more important decisions. That's why Gary Keller wore the same clothes for like the first 30 years of his career. And now he just wears t-shirts and the same black pants. So he's pretty much still doing the same thing. It's about removing a choice. So what I would suggest is one, pick the one thing. If I absolutely have to be 1000% focused from start to finish on a task, what is the one task where I would benefit the most from not allowing myself to be distracted? Do that one thing. Allow that to become a habit. Set a 66-day goal and get an accountability partner to hold you accountable to that. And allow yourself some grace to be jacked up after that. Because the truth is, if you do that one thing really well and consistent, you will get a better outcome, even if you allow yourself to be a little jacked up for the rest of the day. And then once you build that habit, it becomes easier to now layer another little habit on top of it and another little habit, right? There's a method of improvement that's used in, I believe it comes from Japan. It's called the Kaizen method. And that is about making such small incremental positive improvements that it takes no energy to do it, but eventually they compound into massive steps forward. A really good example is there was a point in my life where you would never, ever see me without a great one, French vanilla, extra cream, extra sugar in my hand. If anyone ever drank those, you know what I'm talking about. Like when it's empty, it still feels full because there's an inch and a half of sugar and cream sludge at the bottom of it. I used to slug those things down all day long, every single day. You never saw me without that thing in my hand, no matter what I was doing. I went to the gym with it. I prospected with it. Like it was with me everywhere. And one day I looked up, I was like, this is probably not very healthy. Like, I don't know how bad that is for me, but it's got to be pretty bad. Right. So what I did do is I said, I have a lot of things that I have to focus on that take energy from me. I don't know if I can afford to like go cold turkey. Like, I just don't think I have the bandwidth and I don't care enough, to be honest. Like, I know I should stop, but it's not bothering me enough right now to put that much energy into it. So I use the Kaizen method. I started putting the cream and sugar in myself instead of having them do it. And little by little, I put just the smallest amount less so that it was completely unnoticeable. So that over time, and it probably took, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 months, eventually I was drinking black coffee. Today, 10 years later, probably, you put a grain of sugar in my coffee or a drop of cream. I don't care what time it is. I don't care if I just got off an overnight flight and I got to go straight into a meeting. I will dump that coffee. Can't stand it, can't drink it. Slow progress over time. So I share that because I think if you really get to understand how much mental energy it takes to overcome some of the behaviors we've accidentally ingrained in ourselves, you got to start bucketing those to say, okay, how important is this? Like, is this the thing I'm going to put all that mental energy into to rewire that behavior? Or is it just sort of a minor annoyance? If it's a minor annoyance, I might just leave it alone for now and just accept the fact that, yeah, that's not the perfect thing for me to be doing, but it's not that harmful. And this is way more important. So I'm going to put that mental energy into rewiring this habit. And I'm going to let that be for a bit. Or, you know what? I'm going to use the Kaizen method there. I'm going to go super small. Maybe I want to start exercising, but I'm not actually that motivated to do it. I just want to do it because I think I'm supposed to. Everybody tells me I'm supposed to. I don't. Not super fired up to do it though. Awesome. Get up in the morning and like walk to the end of your driveway and back. And then the next day, walk to your neighbor's mailbox and back. Like ridiculously small things that little by little, you'll be like, you know what, maybe I'm going to walk around the block. Then you're like, you know what, I'm going to run to the next mailbox. Like just let it. So just decide how important is this thing and how much mental energy am I going to put into changing it? If it's really important, then put all the mental energy you can and let the small stuff be screwed up until you have the bandwidth to go be better at the small stuff. Does that help at all, Ryan?
Yeah, for sure. When you're sharing that too, I'm relating it to things that I'm doing right now, which I think, yeah, that was really good. Thank you.
I mean, the truth is we do often fill our brains and our calendars with effort to do things that we don't actually care that much about. We just feel like we're supposed to, right? And then we're just burning up energy that we don't have available for the things that are significantly more important. Okay, any other questions while I search for a quick example?
There's one more in the chat. Randy asks, what are the 3 priority examples for reaching the net income goal?
So I'll give you like a really, really simple example. So the next step that every one of you should take is when we start getting down into the strategy piece, the GPS and the 411, that is a one-on-one exercise. It's hard to do in a giant group setting. It's really hard to do in a Zoom group setting. What I would encourage you to do is take what you've done so far and bring it to the person who is the person in your world who can move that forward, being your productivity coach, your team leader, your assistant team leader, you know, another agent who's a mentor of yours who knows and understands the GPS, the economic model, and the 411. Go to somebody who can help you with the strategy part of it, because it is going to be different for everyone. A really simple example is if I look at, you know, the $1 million example that we used, priority 1 might be to go on 333 listing appointments by December 31st, 2023. Priority 2 might be to have 357 buyer consultations by December 31st, 2023. Like, I'm keeping it super simple right now. And then maybe your third priority is to increase my average sales price by 0.25% or by $50,000, or my average commission by 2.5%. Because when I sell this number of homes and I increase my average sales price by X, that's going to cause me to make more money. So that's a really simple example of, if those are my 3 priorities, if I go on that many listing appointments, that many buyer consultations, and I'm able to raise my average sales price by that, those 3 things happening will cause the $1 million to show up. Now I go underneath that and I do my strategies. Is that helpful for the person who asked the question?
Yeah, that is terrific. Thanks.
Okay, perfect.
Matt, can I add something?
Yes.
So this was very difficult for me, but now I got in the habit, like you say, a little bit at a time. Something that helped me was to read the 12-week year. And then I started breaking my goals in 12 weeks increments. So instead of doing the whole year, which seemed like overwhelming, now my years are broken down in quarters, and then I reevaluate and start again. So it's a reset every 3 months.
Okay, so Serena just gave us a massive gift. A, go read the book. 2, part of what I really love about that book, this is what tends to happen. Oftentimes, we set a goal, we create a plan to achieve that goal, and it requires a quantum leap from where we are to where we need to be, right? Example would be, I'm doing 0 lead generation whatsoever. I've never lead gen in my life. I don't even know how to spell it. I don't know how to, like, no clue, never lead gen. And then you say, I'm going to lead gen 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. I'm not saying that's impossible, yet that's a quantum leap forward, right? So if you set a goal that requires you to lead gen 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you've never lead gen in your life, for most of us, how likely is it that we will actually do that? Not very likely.
Unlikely.
It's possible if we truly have.
Very small.
Yep, right, very small. So what ends up happening is, even if we're fully committed and we do the things we're supposed to do to get to the goal, the reality is there's a delayed reaction. Just because you showed up and did 3 hours of lead gen on Monday doesn't mean you take a listing on Monday. You might, but you might not, right? We don't go to the gym and do 50 crunches and go, wow, look at that 6-pack. Like, that's not a thing, right? So it's time on task over time. So what ends up happening is, let's say we made the goal, we're fully committed to it, we're doing the activities, but January comes and we didn't get the outcome. Why? Because we haven't been doing it long enough yet. So then we're discouraged, like, oh, shoot, why? Because I needed to list 3 houses in January. I listed none. So that means in February, I have to list 6. I've never even listed 3 in a month in my life, and I got to do 6 this month. So I keep doing the activities. Maybe I list 2. And maybe that's the most I've ever listed in a month, but I'm down on myself because now I'm 4 behind and I'm going into the next month. So now I have to list 7. You see what's happening? And then this is what we do. We go, it's not happening. And we give up for the year. And we just go back to flailing around. Part of what's in that book, the beauty of doing that is it gives you a chance to reset every time, and it allows you to focus on the gain rather than the gap. So I set a plan, I figured out what action I had to take. I started taking that action. You know what? The results didn't show up at the pace they needed to for me to hit my goal the first month, but that's okay because I'm going to reset. So when you use that 12-week model, at the end of every 12 weeks, you're resetting and going, okay, I did not hit my goal January. I came really close in February. I nailed it in March. That is massive progress forward. Now I'm going to reset for the next quarter. It allows you to focus on the gain rather than the gap and reset every 90 days based on where you are now to move forward. So I think that's a really good book, and that piece is really powerful. And by the way, that's a thing we do a lot. we make massive progress, but because that progress wasn't enough to get us exactly where we wanted, we get down on ourselves. Instead of going, well, I actually started way back there. And now I'm here, even though I wanted to get here. That's massive progress forward. Reward yourself for that, be proud of that, reset, and keep going. So thank you, Serena, for saying that. Okay, we are at 1:31. I was gonna pull up an example, but instead, any last comments, any questions before we jump? I would love to hear at least 3 ahas. What did you take away from this that is going to be helpful for you in going forward? Give me at least 3 before I let you go. I feel like Brandon has something. Brandon's got I feel like lots of intelligent thoughts are swirling around in Brandon's head and he's not sharing them with us.
Yeah, Duncan here. I mean, obviously you have a plan and then breaking it down into bite-sized bites. Like football players say, I'm going to take it game by game. So we got to take it week by week, as you've already informed us. And we just need to go make it happen. And if we stretch too far, don't throw it out. Like you said, we plan, take credit for, and then move ahead and get some more wins.
You got it. I will share this real quick. If I look back at most of the goals I've set in my life, I've achieved a lot of them. I rarely achieve them on the schedule that I intended to. The majority of the time, they ended up being a little harder and taking a little longer than I would have liked. And maybe my intention was to hit it in a year, and I didn't quite get there, but fast forward 18 months or 2 years, I'm there. So I found it typically takes me longer to get where I want to go, but I get there, right? And at the end of the day, I'll take that over just not getting there at all. So I love that. Thank you. Brandon, I saw you came off mute, buddy. What you got?
Put things into smaller chunks, and if you don't get that, part of that smaller chunk achieved, then okay, look back that night and say, okay, what can I do differently tomorrow? Or fit it in. As long as you fit it in some point during your schedule, like, oh, I've got an extra hour Thursday that I did something that I didn't get done on Tuesday. Let's put it in there and get it done. You can mark it off your list and you can get back on track.
Exactly. Erase and replace. And by the way, another little pro tip, when you're working off of a 411, we always have to-dos in our life, right? And like sometimes if you're coaching or consulting with someone, you'll see a bunch of stuff on their 411, like call the plumber to get the faucet fixed in the downstairs bathroom. And you're like, okay. If I'm not mistaken, your goal is to make $400,000 this year. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. Help me understand how that gets you to that goal. Well, I mean, it doesn't, but it's important. The faucet's leaking. Okay, fair enough. Turn the 411 over. To-do list goes on the back. In order to earn the right to flip the paper over and do those things, you just have to do the things on the front first. Until you've lead gen, until you've done whatever those things are, those things don't matter. You do those things on the front, flip it over. Now you can do your to-do list. And by the way, if you get really disciplined about following it and winning the day in the beginning of the day, you can actually spend the rest of the day being significantly less disciplined because you already did the most important thing. So you've won the day. The rest of the day, if you go a little off kilter, you did your job already. It's okay, right? Bonnie, what do you got?
Actually, a couple of things. Just thank you so much for that spreadsheet that we can use on the free resources. That's awesome, because then we can just continue to do that year after year, which is great, and look back. And the other thing was, the goals and priorities being the outcome and the strategies being the activities, the action you take. That really clicked home for me. Success is the accumulation of all choices we make. That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Love it. Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, anything else before we jump?
Yeah, Matt, it's Ed. So I got a couple things that ahas here. So first of all, thinking back to working with Susan Donnelly, her big statement was do the 2. If I do the 2, make 2 appointments every month, I hit my numbers. But what I found was interesting is, I'm not quite sure exactly what you said when we're talking about the 411, but I always resist using a 411. But what I liked about it was setting up the things of the exactly what I have to do each and every week, consistently each and every week, instead of always going off on the shiny things. So it's all, you know, I've got all these things that are successful and I can do successfully, but I don't do it every single week. I do this for a little while, then I move to that one, then I move to that one, but I'm not consistent in a lot of different activities, even from something simple as having marketing running on Facebook on a consistent basis.
Yep.
And if I just make that list of everything that needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and just do it when it needs to be done, I'd be much more successful.
Love that. I'm going to give you one other pro tip. If you find yourself, and this happens to everybody, I go through this exercise when I feel it. My market center team, I've had them do it more times than they would like to admit. They're never super excited about it, yet it's significantly helpful. And Ed's in my market center. He's probably heard me say this 1,000 times. I call it the 15-minute exercise. And I got this from Brian Buffini. I heard Brian Buffini years and years and years ago say, if you're feeling stress in your life, take a look at two things. Look at your bank account, look at your calendar. You are probably spending time and money on things that are not in alignment with your goals and your values. And when I heard that, that was like a brick along the side of that. Like it stuck with me and I've been repeating it for 15 years now. So there's an exercise that I use to check myself. If I find myself working, I'm going to the office, I'm putting in 12 hours, but I'm coming home exhausted and going, I don't know what I actually accomplished today. Like I was definitely working all day. But what did I actually accomplish? What did I actually move forward? This is what we'll do. 1 week, you carry a little notebook with you, super annoying. I'm just going to call it what it is, super annoying. For 1 week, you carry a notebook with you. Every 15 minutes, you jot down what you did in the last 15 minutes in 3 words or less. Brushing my teeth, whatever, 15 minutes or less. Like obviously you go into a listing appointment, you don't stop in the middle of a listing appointment. If it takes an hour, when you get out, you write the time slot, it was an hour. But for 15 minutes, every 15 minutes you do that. End of the day, you highlight in green everything that was dollar productive. Dollar productive means it is making you money and moving you closer to your goal. Just to be super clear, putting a listing in MLS is not one of those things. Making the calls to get the listing appointment, going on the listing appointment, those fall in that bucket. Putting the listing in, no, that doesn't move you towards a goal. That is an administrative activity that has to happen once you've done the thing that moves you towards your goal. So you highlight everything that is dollar productive. You do that for a week. At the end of every day, you look at it and you say, okay, how many of the hours that I just spent working were activities that actually moved me towards my goal, and how much of it was minutia? A couple of things happen. One, typically you will have a very productive week because you will try to impress yourself. Secondly, no matter how efficient, effective, or disciplined you are, you will find hours of time that when you look at it, you go, that was a waste of time. That was a waste of time. That was a waste of time, right? So at the end of the week, you look at what are the buckets that are wasting the most amount of my time that are not green. And when you highlight in green, you should be ruthless. If it does not directly correlate to moving your goal forward, it is not a green. If it is a supportive activity, it is not a green. Green is the activity that gets me there. At the end, you look at all the stuff you're doing that is not green, and you ask yourself 3 questions. Number 1, if I stop doing it, would anybody even notice or care? If the answer is no, just get rid of it, dump it. It's the 3 Ds, dump it. Nobody cares, nobody's going to notice if I stop doing it. Second one is, this is important, it does have to happen. But if I really think it through, it's not me who has to do it. Someone has to do it, but not necessarily me. That's a delegate. Who can I delegate that to? You can delegate 2 different ways, people or systems. Ed mentioned keeping social media marketing going. My argument would be if you have an assistant, the assistant does it. If you don't have an assistant, is there a VA or real concierge or something like that in the market center that can do it? Or is there a software that you can set it up once and let it run for 30 days and then go back and do it again, right? You want to systematize it. So it's dump it, delegate it, and the only thing left is the stuff that absolutely has to happen, and you are the only person who can do it. And that's what you focus on. And that allows you, when I did this the very first time, and I know we're way over, so anybody who wants to jump, feel free to jump. You're not going to offend me. The first time I did this is a real story. I was leaving my house to go to work, and my wife asked me, "Hey, what are you doing today?" And I was annoyed by the question. And my response was, "Why do you always ask me that question? I am a realtor. I am going to go realtor today. You are a social worker. I don't ever ask you what you're doing today. You're going to go social work." And then I left. Now, I got in the car, I drove away, and my first thought was, shit, I'm gonna have to apologize for that when I get home. Second thought was, why did that question irritate me so much? The reality was the question irritated me because I didn't actually know the answer to the question. I knew I was going to work. I knew I was dressed for it. I knew I had my laptop with me. Like, I knew I was going to put in a 10-hour day plus, but I wasn't super clear on exactly what I was going to be doing. And that's what actually irritated me. Right. And that's what caused me to do the exercise. And by the way, I was a pretty efficient individual. Like, I did my lead gen, like I was pretty, and I did this exercise, and guess what I realized? I looked at it and said, wow, I've got 2.5 hours a day that is wasted time. And that 2.5 hours is the difference between me getting home and having dinner with my family. So they see that that's important enough to me to be there, which means they're important enough. That 2.5 hours is the difference of me being at that table for dinner or not. And I'm choosing not to be there because of all this crap. Right. And some of that crap is I decided to get in the car and go drive to get a bottle of water, even though there's a bubbler, because I just felt like I needed a stretch. Or somebody walked in the office and said, "Hey, got a minute?" And I like to talk. So I was like, "Sure, what's up?" And then I sat down, and next thing you know, 45 minutes of my day was gone. All this stuff. And it changed how I behaved. Now, if somebody knocked on my door and said, "Hey, you got a minute?" I would say, "Is it super urgent, or can I call you tonight on my way home? It'll probably be like 5 o'clock-ish. I can give you my undivided attention." No, it's actually not even important at all. Forget it. And they'd walk away. I'd be like, "Why did you even knock then?" Right? Or they'd say, "No, that's fine. Just give me a call." If they said it was an emergency, I'd be like, "Yeah, cool. What's up?" 90% of the time, they said, "Don't even worry about it. It's not important." And they left. Or they said, "Yeah, if you can call me at 5, great. Awesome. Now I'm calling them in my drive time. I'm not wasting time." It changed how I communicated with my clients. I started asking them, and this is before it was the normal communication. I would ask them, "Are you comfortable with texting? Is it okay if you and I communicate via text? Is that an appropriate means of communication for you?" And when they said yes, we had a client sheet that I would check. They're okay with texting. Now, if I had to let them know there was an inspection scheduled at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, I didn't call them because that turned into 15 minutes. It was a text. "Home inspection is scheduled 2 o'clock Tuesday. I'll make sure somebody's there." Send. They'd come back. "Great, Matt. Thank you. Awesome." Like, that was it. That's 15 minutes of my day I just saved. Right? It changed how I functioned, and it changed what I was allowed to come in, because I started to realize, even being disciplined, there was a whole bunch of wasted space. So I encourage anyone to go through that exercise and be honest with yourself. I don't care how disciplined you are. You will find space that you're wasting, and then you can ask yourself, what's actually more important that I should be using that time for, be it for your business or your family or yourself. All right, on that note, I'm going to get off my soapbox, and I'm going to let you guys go because we are almost 15 minutes over. So I apologize for that. Hopefully it was worth the extra 15 minutes. If anybody needs anything after this that I can help with, feel free to reach out to me, and go back to your market center leadership. Bring them what you got from this and allow them to help you take it from this to your calendar. Fair enough?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much,
Thanks, Matt.
guys.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.